Welcome to the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys, sponsored by Checker. Background screens for your faith or volunteer organization. The Church Safety Guys is a nonprofit organization. Our mission is to inspire, influence, and impact church safety and security teams. We are protectors, guardians, ambassadors, and shepherds. We are about all things church safety and security, which starts with a ministry mindset and a servant's heart. Join us for the next hour as the Church Safety Guys unpack safety, security, leadership, and ministry operations with your hosts, James McGarvey and Mike Scully. This broadcast is also available on social media, YouTube, your favorite podcast platforms, and on the all-new Church Security app.
Well, hello and welcome to the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys. I am James and I am joined on this broadcast with my good friend, Mike.
Hey, James.
How are you doing, sir?
Not bad. A hair of an echo, but we're...
For sure. So on this broadcast, I am actually sitting in the living room of Dr. Brian Patterson. And I'm going to try and bring him in. So I'm going to step back for just a second and let Mike talk to you about some of our resources, and we can jump in as soon as I'm back.
Well, I think in the meantime, I'm going to take an opportunity to just say that there's a need for prayer to wrap folks in Nigeria in prayer right now. Some breaking news, reports that a Catholic parish in southwestern Nigeria was attacked with multiple worshipers shot and detonated explosives, is what I'm reading so far. It was the St. Francis Catholic Church in Ondo State. Is what I'm seeing. So a lot feared dead. Not a whole lot of reports and information as of yet, but we are seeing that, and that is breaking news at this time. We know we have folks all over the world that listen to this show, and we just ask everyone that is listening tonight to wrap them in prayers. Want to call attention to, if you're not a regular follower of this show, if you happen to cross it today, be sure to give it a like, give it a subscribe if you're listening on YouTube. Check out our website, churchsafetyguys.com. We also have a church security app. You can get that in Apple or Android and download that. You can get a whole lot of free resources and information directly through there if you sign up completely free. Get in there and use those for your church.
You know, typically we plan when we do our scheduling for broadcasts, we look out at about 4 or 5 months out, and we kind of Mike and I talk about it, and we talk a lot with folks that serve with us in CSG and Church Safety Guys and that sort of thing. And you know, it's interesting. I think with all of the mental health concerns going on, it's providential. I'm going to say that we tonight are talking about that. And if you did have the chance to actually come to our October conference in Columbus, Ohio, Dr. Patterson was one of our amazing guest speakers. He got a standing ovation. Everybody loved him. And he really hits point with some of the mental health concerns and how it impacts the church and some of the things that we need to do as believers to stand up for what's right. And so I reached out to him and he agreed to graciously have me come in his living room. So I am sitting next to him, so I'll bring him on the camera, and hopefully we'll have a smooth a smooth broadcast for sure. But thank you, Brian, for joining us on this broadcast. It's really an honor to have you.
I appreciate it, James.
Have you with us. So if you could just kind of go through your background, like where I know you were, you served in the military, and what kind of pushed you besides God, what kind of led you down the road of being in psychology and and kind of going in that direction.
Okay, so well, I started back in 1982. I entered the United States Army and enlisted, and as a tanker, and went from boot camp right over to Germany to a border PAB unit. This would have been 82 to 84 during the height of the Cold War. I served on tanks and armored personnel carriers with the CAV. Came back to the States, and then eventually went to commissioned to second lieutenant as an engineer, and I spent 8 years. After 4 years enlisted, 8 years with the with engineers, and so I did 12 years with the military, and then I transitioned. On the civilian side, I eventually became a nurse. Worked in the nursing field for a number of years, and then felt led to come over to mental health. Worked in the mental health area for a number of years and continued to get my credentials, master's and PhD. And so initially, when I started out in mental health, I was with the community mental health institutions around Central Ohio, adult mental health, extreme mental health issues like schizophrenia, those kind of things. And then as a counselor, I started out in adult and adolescent addictions. And then eventually started my own practice. So I started working in mental health 22 years ago. I started my practice in Worthington 16 years ago. And so right now I primarily work with couples and adult clients working with dealing with addiction.
Okay.
Those kind of things.
Sure.
I spent, I taught at Columbus State Community College for 15 years. I wrapped that up this past year, and I spent also 6 years working at University of Dayton Graduate School, working with counseling students. So I spent 6 years teaching at the graduate level. So
awesome,
yeah.
And you've written a few outstanding books too. I'll mention.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, and actually we have the Warrior Code is one of the first books that Brian wrote, and there's actually a link to that on our website, so you can actually go to our resource page down at the bottom and definitely check that out because it's a great resource. Brian is very passionate. Like when you write, I haven't read too many authors that are extremely passionate as you are about that topic. And the Warrior Code for Men, a guide for men, is really a unique book. Anyone can read it, but at the same time, it's very encouraging, and I think it's a great resource. Thank you,
James. I wrote it as a counter to the idea that masculinity is toxic.
Sure.
And that whole idea that men should be a certain way, and men are what God calls us to be. Mm-hmm. And so the book really just kind of a somewhat raw look, in my opinion, as well as tools that I've written through the years for my clients about how God expects for us to be men as Christians, as individuals, as members of a family, as head of a household, as members of a society and a culture, and how the broader pop culture and broader society is really, I dare say, socializing men to be less than masculine. Mm-hmm. And so the idea that what masculinity is really is defined by us through God's word.
Sure.
And so just my thoughts on that. So
your thoughts the book is really thick.
I have a lot of ideas about what,
sure.
Not just what God expects us to be, but how that is relevant in modern society. Sure. And how often, the Bible says we're peculiar mm-hmm. because we're different. Mm-hmm. And so it's just my thoughts. It's
definitely, if you haven't checked it out, you definitely should check it out. It's one of the resources that we strongly encourage, and it's very, very much spirit-led, very very biblically sound and biblically based, and it takes a long time to read through it, because you're trying to digest and process, because it is very, very deep. But at the same time, I mean, it's a great resource that if you were looking for something, say for your safety team or something like that for a group study, that would be great. And I think you're working on are you working on the group study or
still working on that piece, yeah.
That's okay.
So we put out 2 additional books.
Sure.
The For Strength and Honor really is a book for men, women, and families. Again, it's a number of tools.
Sure.
That can be applied to modern day life.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third book is the Warrior Handbook, which is written specifically for law enforcement, first responders, military, and veterans,
Mm-hmm.
and the unique needs and challenges that they face, especially today. So
for sure. And we'll put those on the website as well. So if someone is interested in checking those out, we'll have that link as well, so that folks can take a look at that. So
if I could, one last thing.
Sure.
In addition to working my practice, in addition to working with couples and adult issues, I also specifically work with law enforcement, first responders, military, and veterans. And have for a number of years.
And that's kind of what I'd like to get into a little bit on this broadcast, just talking about first responders and mental health as it comes into the church, because we know that as a church reaches out to the community, and especially in a post-COVID, hopefully post-COVID era, we're starting to see more concerns come to the church in the realm of mental health.
Yes.
And oftentimes Mike and I both have had the experience of working with churches and kind of trying to coach them and help them embrace that and understand how to navigate, because, church safety and security is so much more than just really just, strapping a gun to yourself and going out there and, playing security or something like that. And from the mental health concern and piece of it, oftentimes we're called in a situation to I don't want to say deal with, because that sounds kind of crass, but at the same time, to address the concerns of mental health as individuals come in and are looking for help. So let's go down that road before the break. What are you, actually, let me turn it over to Mike real quick, because he wants to jump in and say something, and then we'll go down that road.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
No, just as a quick comment, one, Brian, great to have you on the show. Good to see you again. Wish it wasn't 7-8 months, but hey, you know what? Anyhow, it's good to see you. But I figure that the timing is providential as well. We're just on the heels of Mental Health Awareness Month in May, which is great now here in June. But also really that, to hit on James' point, is I think there's a lot of churches that, not just for the onslaught of the mental health issues that we're seeing as a swell, if you will, additional come to the church doorstep. But beyond that, it's important enough, and yet it's growing, that these churches and these safety teams really should be training regularly. And by regular, I would say is, if you're training regularly for CPR, you should probably have a behavioral health or a mental health related training for your team almost as equivalent, as frequently. And that's not happening today. So I feel like there's a gap in churches that need more to address these challenges.
You're welcome to comment on that.
About specific challenges that the church is likely facing.
Sure.
There's been a serious underestimation of the impact of the response to COVID on things like mental health and addiction, and marital health.
Sure.
In our society. So while America and the West and the world were focusing on COVID death numbers, nobody was really except for the mental health profession, we're really talking about the impact of isolation on let's say addiction, right? So we know that people that are in recovery from an addiction have to have a community. They have to interact with other people in recovery. They have to live actively, overtly as a part of the recovery process. And COVID negated that, in a significant way. How about depression? People that are struggling with clinical depression were then shoved into isolation. And so the consequences have been very profound. And I'd imagine, I don't have the numbers on it, but far more impactful than the COVID virus itself globally. And so, the church is the center of the community. And so when you have people now that the community or society is opening up and people are coming out and coming into churches, they're bringing these extreme mental health situations or circumstances or status into the church. And a lot of times church leadership are ill-equipped to deal with some of the extreme issues. And then when we talk about certain diagnoses like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, some of these extreme diagnoses, there's often a religiosity that goes with it. So you have people, let's say, that are hallucinating. You'll see, have people say that either Jesus or Satan are directing them to do this or that. And I think that when we see all these mass shootings, it's easy to focus on guns and not address the underlying and significant issues like mental health, like the influence of pop culture and media on the minds of people that are troubled, and the consequence that comes with irresponsible behaviors of people in the media and people in the broader culture. It's always going to be easy to focus on one thing and not deal with the broader issue that are driving a lot of the things that are occurring. I don't know if that answered your question, but
sure.
Kind of leapt into a couple of topics here. And so the church has to be prepared to address whatever comes into whatever the individual that walks into the church, whatever they're presenting with.
Technical difficulties, please stand by. It's some good comments, Brian. I think in general that echoes kind of the sentiment. The church is really ill-equipped, and safety teams are definitely ill-equipped, but there's even pastors that certainly have not looked at that as in general as well. And maybe that's something we can unpack further after the break, because at the end of the day, I'm going to go to kind of say, there's so much going on there, and there's so many triggers and drivers of that mental health. But if we just turn to scripture and we say, 2 Timothy, for God gave us a spirit, not of fear, but of power, of love, and self-control. And it really has a theme text there of that ability of getting back towards control, back towards shedding that fear and turning and rooting that in scripture, in what we have as an opportunity to kind of ground ourselves and bring us back to that. And that, I believe, not only as a safety leader, but as different pastors as well, that's really what they're reaching when these folks come in and present with these additional challenges and perhaps even diagnosis.
Well, and I think to your point on that, Mike, I think that oftentimes we have this our imagination is built up, and we have this perception of what we expect or anticipate mental health concerns to be. And I think from the aspect of a safety team, when someone comes in, we automatically assume that, someone that has a mental health concern, maybe we stereotype too much. and just make the assumption that, okay, if this person's coming in, this is how they're going to act. And I'm kind of nervous because I don't have the training to handle or to step in and help that person. And what's interesting to me, and I think I've used the example before, is starting each day or, starting each service day with prayer and, prayer and supplication, taking a moment, meeting with your team, praying with them, and just saying a simple prayer of, God, give me the wisdom, and strength to handle a situation where I don't know the outcome, and use me. I've prayed that multiple times and gotten pulled into situations with mental health where someone just wanted me to sit down and pray with them, and that's not complicated, right? I mean, I actually had a gentleman who I felt the Spirit of the Lord telling me, go talk to him. And because I walked past him and I'm like, hey, how are you doing today? And he's like, well, I'm okay. And I just knew he wasn't okay from how he said it. And something prompted me, probably the Holy Spirit. So I turned around and I went back to him and I said, you're not okay. Is there something I can help you with? I called on the radio. I'm like, hey guys, I need to step off, for just a second and help step off the floor, help this individual talk to him. And we sat down and he said, my wife left me last night and I came here. And he just, starts crying and he's like, she's been having an affair. I don't know what to do. Can you pray for me? And can you pray with me? And I said, absolutely. I'm not, and I told him, I said, I'm not a counselor. I said, I can hook you up with a counselor. We can get you with a pastor. We can do all sorts of things. I can help you because I know the resources. So I can get you to the right resources. But I said, the first resource is I can pray with you. And that's how I need to handle this. And so he was very grateful. When we were done praying, he stood up, he gave me a big bear hug and he said, thanks for not walking away. Thanks for actually stopping, because you're the fifth or sixth person that said hi and then, left. And, I'll throw it over to you, but that's, a simple thing. And we've said this, we've trumpeted this from day one, that, your team, from an instructional opportunity standpoint, your team needs to be just as quick to be able to pray with someone as to respond or to do anything else and handle that situation. So.
Absolutely. Well, and you kind of picked up on it right there, is you started with the right attitude. And that's what matters in any case. You don't know who you're going to encounter, what you're going to encounter, what they're bringing in with them from any standpoint. So having the right attitude is, I think, the start. Having empathy and willingness to actually listen to the person, I think obviously is very big beyond that. And you just took time. You took time to, beyond the checking the box, waving hi, you actually took time to connect. And I think that's where it opened that up and gave you the opportunity. Thank God that it just presented as an opportunity to pray, because obviously there's risk in any of those situations. But I'd say
Sure.
Take it even a step further, is really beyond that, is looking at even within your own folks, people that can be within your church or regular goers on a normal basis could be susceptible to mood swings, irritability, any sort of things. They could be suffering themselves, and it could be somebody that's a known individual. And as a result, you don't want to just look past them from a standpoint of, oh, I know them, they're fine. Well, yes, as a person, maybe they're fine, but as an individual currently right now, maybe they're not. Maybe they're hurting and maybe they need something.
Well, and that definitely, and I'll throw it over to Brian and then we'll take a quick break. But, that goes from to the concern of mental health and being concerned about how your safety team is responding, right? How are they engaged? How are they embracing the ministry focus and the vision portion of serving? Because as a leader, for those of you that direct a team, you need to be concerned with the mental status and situation of the individual that's serving. And we can probably, for sake of time, we can come back after the break and talk maybe a little bit more, but I'll throw it over to Brian.
Well, the common human experience is pain, and and unfortunately loneliness. It may be understandable that a single person might feel alone, but married people with large families often feel very alone. And so when people come to the hospital, aka the church, we have to think in those terms that this person is likely going through something because everybody is going through something. And it is important to have like a kind of a universal precaution attitude. It's a nursing term, right? Putting on gloves. Universal precaution attitude about everybody that walks into the church is in a trial. It's been said either you're going into a trial, you're going through a trial, or you're coming out of a trial, right? And so when people are not empathetic and not attuned to the moment and what a person might or might not be experiencing, they often miss the cues that will either indicate that a person is in need of help, like you responded to those cues, James. You saw something. But even more broadly, when it comes to extreme mental health issues, you have to pay attention to what cues are being presented, whether somebody in need of help and or somebody's a threat. Now, one of the challenges with extreme mental health issues, there may not be cues. If a person is attending to, like I said, to some type of hallucination, you may not be or may not be aware of what's going on as they're, a lot of times people will appear very calm and then in an instant, begin to act out. And so it's just really, it's imperative that the security personnel and the leadership in the church is aware of who's moving in and out of the facility, and to simply pay attention, because these are challenging times when it comes to mental health. And it's my belief as a professional, it's going to get worse before it gets better. We're talking about economic downturn and economic issues. We're talking about extreme conversations in the media that it just tend to push the buttons of people that are already troubled, and people are acting out on the things they're hearing in the broader pop culture and in media. Again, I'm repeating myself, but it's such an important point that that there's just a lack of care in what people are willing to say that are getting out to the broader society. And so you've got young men and women or young people and living in isolation and loneliness, and maybe some are being bullied or have been bullied and they're living in their parents' basement. And sometimes even in a fantasy world, we've got people spending hours and hours on video games. Not to say that video games are a cause, but they're a factor. And between some of the social media and the inundation of all of these technologies coalesce or come together into some pretty dire situations. I think that's what we're saying. And so it's just wise that every ministry take it upon themselves to get the training, regular training, and to pay attention to what's happening in society.
Well, and to one of the things that you said about the factors, I've had the opportunity to talk to several teachers in the school system, in the public school system, and they're saying that most kids are now being about at least a grade, maybe more than a grade back from the 2 years that that we were in COVID, and that that kind of speaks to what you just mentioned on we don't understand the gravity of the situation, because honestly, if we look at it as a whole, we were in many cases isolation for 2 years, and in some cases we're still there are still places that are embracing that. So from that standpoint, it's not something, unfortunately, it's not something that's going to be fixed right away.
Sure.
And people, like, we're in a self-gratification, society, we want it fixed. We want problems fixed now. We want, we want an answer now.
Yes.
And what we have to realize is that it's going to take time to reverse that damage and to really evaluate how to do that. But I'll go ahead and throw it over to Mike, and then we'll go ahead and take a quick sponsor break. But
to just follow that real quick, the real challenge is, COVID was so focused on, hey, let's get the tests out there. Let's make statistics big. Let's focus on this number over here. Well, there's not a shiny little nasal swab or this, that, or the other test to identify mental illness. And they certainly haven't been pushed and sent out to homes all over the country to say, is this hurting? So there's an epidemic of mental illness, I believe, that's out there that's not being tested for and is only coming to light with things that when there's certain trigger points. So we're seeing things bubble over in some, but there's still a lot that I think is hidden beyond that. I'm sure you would agree, Brian.
Well, absolutely. And one significant facet of that is addiction. So, we already had an opioid epidemic, 2 decades in, and now the fentanyl issue is just stunning. There's enough, just last year, to my understanding, there was enough fentanyl, which is a synthetic opioid, seized, enough to kill everybody in America. It is a very dangerous drug. It is in our streets, in the most affluent of neighborhoods. And yet we don't really talk about that. We don't talk about crystal meth is on the resurgence right now. We don't want to talk about the true devastation of marijuana use as America is walking towards the legalization of marijuana for recreational use. We don't want to talk about the negative impact that it has on adolescent population. It is the number one drug used and abused by kids. It has a horrifying effect on kids and their families, but that's not a part of the conversation because people want to get high. So there is a selective focus on what certain elements in our society want to focus on, and it's to the detriment of our country as a whole. People are dying in silence and quiet because it's not important to certain elements of our country. It's important to us that serve the kingdom of heaven, and for those of us that work in the mental health community. It is amazing the amount of addictions and people that are dying and suffering, and nobody really wants to address it. So let's open up another marijuana store for mental health issues, right? So, for example, not to go down a rabbit hole, but a lot of people smoke weed because they have anxiety. The side effect of marijuana use is anxiety. We know that research shows that for an adolescent to smoke weed, you're losing at least 8 IQ points. That's stunning. We talk about marijuana has, affects, the hippocampus of the brain and the seat of memory. It negatively affects motivation and decision making and relationships. On top of the fact, as James just pointed out, there is a hole in the education of practically every child in America, a hole that may never be overcome because it's such a big issue. Kids have had to be pushed along. They were passed along with an inefficient education experience because of COVID. So there are a lot of things that are not a part of the national dialogue. As we focus on this over here is being not dealt with. So
for sure. Well, we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. And then when we come back, we'll dive into mental health in your team a little bit more, and we'll chat about that. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
At Centurion Bible College, we're authentic about relationships, we're passionate on training, we're unapologetically biblical. And as the first college in the United States to design an associate's program in church safety and security, we're innovative. Explore Centurion Bible College and you'll find the tools to be better prepared to support your community and the mission of your church, the culture to help you engage with the people you serve with, and the environment to foster learning and leadership. Discover Centurion Bible College today. Enhance and develop the skills to engage and connect with your community when they need you the most. Be intentional in your community with a ministry mindset, understand concepts of safety and security, and make a difference today. For more information or to enroll, visit centurionbc.org or churchsafetyguys.com.
Even at church, bad things can happen. Medical emergencies, active shooters, predators, even domestic disputes. Is your church, is your ministry, is your sanctuary prepared? Do you have a safety or security team? Find out how you can be with James McGarvey's new book, The Case for Church Safety and Security. James McGarvey's experience and training, along with a biblical foundation, bring much needed information in today's trying times. It offers a true biblical perspective for starting, keeping, and growing a safety or security ministry in your church or place of worship. The Case for Church Safety and Security, a brand new book, includes a special foreword by Frank Pomeroy, the pastor at the First Baptist Church, Sutherland Springs, Texas, where they experienced the worst active shooter in U.S. history. This compelling book shares insight on preparing yourself and your church from potential threats with a biblical worldview. Start your journey to a more secure ministry and worship freely, knowing you're safe. Get more information now at churchsafetyguys.com and pick up your copy today.
The Church Safety Guys help church and place of worship safety and security teams all over North America through our broadcasts, online communities, conferences, trainings, resources, and the all-new Church Security app. Download it today. Help us continue to reach churches by supporting our sponsors, purchasing our resources, and consider becoming a ministry partner by making a monthly or one-time donation. Remember to like, subscribe, and share this broadcast with your team. And now, back to the broadcast.
News on what we brought you at the top of the episode, the attack on St. Francis Xavier Catholic Church in Owo, Nigeria. It looks like it happened at, I'm not sure time zone here, 3:51 p.m. Multiple sources reporting unidentified gunmen attacked at that church, and at least 50 people were killed. Unspecified number of worshipers were wounded. Gunman is believed to have used explosives during the attack as well. Looks as it possibly as a result of economic activities that were largely suspended in the area as a result. So more coming in on that. It's developing as we speak. But again, I think that now takes it perhaps as one of the largest in the world that we've ever heard of as far as an attack with number of lives lost. So again, continue to wrap them in prayer. Hopefully that count doesn't increase. It's already terrible, but just want to bring that to you while we're working through these technical difficulties.
Okay, I think we're back and we'll move forward. And I know, Mike, you wanted to talk about identifying signs, and maybe I'd like to chat about engaging folks that serve, right? And looking at them, helping them, but also some of the things to talk about. So Brian, what do you think some identifying signs of mental illness would be, just in general?
Their appearance, how they're dressed, mannerisms, their speech pattern. When you engage with a person, a lot of times there are telltale signs of there's something happening. As you pointed out a moment ago, that you saw an individual that was clearly going through something, and you addressed it. And so use some common sense.
Sure.
We know what social norms there are. So for, let's say, some of the common things like with schizophrenia, we'll see if it's a woman, her makeup is off, maybe some extreme, dressing, the way people dress. Bipolar disorder, you may see some odd, outfits. If there's depression, you'll see a lot of times body language, downtrodden, slumped shoulders, a slow gait or walk or pattern, or slow speech. So it's really about speaking directly to the person, looking in their eyes, take a common sense approach to looking at them from head to toe, and then ultimately, a lot of times there will be some type of indicator that something's up.
For sure. And that's one of the things that I would mention with your team as well. Just from the standpoint of, if you assemble, you gather your team, and all of a sudden you start noticing that maybe someone that's not their normal cheerful self is upset or depressed. It takes 30 seconds to actually say, are you okay? Is there something I can pray for you about, or pray with you about? And I think that really makes the difference. I mean, we talk often about building into your team, getting their engagement, connecting with them, and serving with them in a positive fashion. But discipleship comes with being connected.
Yeah.
And, we can't disciple individuals that are serving with us as leaders if we're so focused on just getting to it, get to your post, that's all we're focused on. We have to take the time to invest in the individuals that are serving with us. Otherwise they're going to get burned out, and it's going to be short-lived.
Absolutely. One of the telltales, just with some of the recent mass shootings and murder suicide things, one of the significant telltale signs of suicidality, if you have a member of your church and they're giving their belongings away, and following a period of, if they've been depressed for a period of time, and then they appear in high spirits and maybe gregarious, and they're giving their belongings away and things of that, or being very generous. A lot of times, what happens with depression leading to suicide, when a person sees the end is coming, they often will get a mental lift, because the pain is going to be over soon. And so if you see this pattern of depression, and then a person that's all of a sudden is very happy, it's a concern. It's a concern. And as far as the members of the team, never be afraid to ask, are you at risk? Are you considering suicide? Are you considering homicide? Be assertive. You're not going to plant something in somebody's mind. I'm suggesting don't be so concerned about that, as concerned as being forthright, directive, in exploring, be very direct in exploring what their issue is. Don't be shy. Ask.
And I love that you mentioned that, because oftentimes people they'll, I'm going to hesitate because I feel like you're saying something that's awkward, but I don't know really how to handle it. Like, okay, that's awkward.
Yes.
And I'm chuckling not to make light of the conversation or the discussion, but at the same time, that's how, until I understood that's how I treated it. I was very much like, I don't know what to say. What can I do, to be involved with that person and to help them? But being direct, transparent seems like the best course of action.
Yeah. And a lot of times it can shake them out of where they're at.
Sure.
And their plans. Because now you've really addressed maybe something that they're really on track to do, or a trajectory that is set, and you've maybe interrupted that trajectory that may actually stop some tragedy from happening.
And that's you can't underestimate or overestimate the power of being able to plant that seed in the middle of somebody's thinking.
Sure.
Like, I know this is the way it's got to go.
Sure.
And then you come up and you just drop the seed of, hey, can I pray for you? Can I pray with you? Are you thinking about doing this? And then, that's enough to sometimes derail the whole train of thought to say, wait a second, this individual cares about me enough that they've stopped. And sometimes the challenge too with a team itself is going beyond that, right? It's not just that one moment, but kind of connecting and continuing to connect with that team or that individual to show and express the love of Christ and be consistent. Because we don't want to be flash in the pan. We don't want to just fix the problem now. We want to be able to help that individual long term.
Yes.
To be successful and to understand that we value their life as much as Christ values their life.
That's right.
So,
and there's two other things if I could touch on.
Sure.
One, there's a term, church hurt. And so if you have somebody that's showing up at the church and they appear disgruntled, again, ask them, what's going on? Why are you upset? A lot of times, people will
you're good.
may have an issue with something that's occurred to them, for them in the church, and they may be prepared to act out because of it. And then one other thing is if they're hyper focused on a particular individual in the church, you need to explore what that is, what that's about, and what's going on with that. If they're let's say it's a spouse or somebody that has an issue with one of the elders of the pastor, you really want to be forthright and exploring what's going on. Why are you hyper focused on this person or that person, or the church as a whole?
Mm-hmm. And that's a great point as well, because when somebody is hyper focused, there's a certain level of safety and security that typically comes up with that. And the reality is, if maybe the pastor preached something that they didn't resonate with them or they didn't agree with, which, we all know how that goes. Everything offends everybody now. But the reality is oftentimes, preaching from God's word is piercing, right?
Yes.
So when we have that type of situation, it's good to keep track of that and monitor that, even from a social media perspective and somebody talking about something, because then that gives us almost like a red flag to say,
yes,
you know what, we need to take this serious. So, Mike, you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, what we're noticing right off the bat is this goes back to general situational awareness. Regardless of it being a mental health trigger or other cause, we're looking at changes from baseline. We're looking at what's abnormal, what's not, that behavior, that any sort of actions that are occurring, things that are being said, etc. But we as a safety lead or safety team, our number one goal, and what you guys were just talking about, is really identifying the problem. If you identify that, hey, there's a cause, there is a motivation, there's a trigger, there's a person they're hyper focused on, well, then you as a team immediately have to key into that and keep that person out of visibility. Don't let them actually enter that zone, because that could then just escalate the situation. And so it really, we've identified that problem. That's going into the next step, which I really feel is you now need to take charge and ensure safety for all around. And that includes the person themselves, because they could be a detriment to them, their own safety. And so you need to understand that when you're encountering that, when you identify that there's a problem, when you've seen that change from baseline, now it's about, what do I have to do to create a safe zone? And that safe zone is everything that you possibly can do, not allowing that trigger in, but also understanding where you are when you actually encounter the potential individual. Because you may not be in your normal post. You may be in the lobby. You may be somewhere. Is there something that could be grabbed? Is there something that could become a weapon very quickly? Because it's in that area of opportunity, if you will, for that individual. So I think that's important. The next I'd say is focus on feelings. Make sure you're kind of really trying to engage them and be empathetic. As Brian said earlier, you want to stay calm. You want to stay measured in how you respond. You don't want to cross your arms. You don't want to be too frustrated. And really, as our good friend John Riley says, you want to practice active reflective listening.
Yes.
For sure. For sure. And you touched on about 20 things that I would like to go deeper on, but we're pretty much out of time, even with all the technical difficulties. So maybe next time in the not too distant future, we can have Brian back on again and certainly talk more, because it's as always, it's been a pleasure and honor for you to join us, because we appreciate your insight.
Thank you.
I want to throw one last thought in there before we do move on. And Brian, thank you. Great to have you on. A lot of great insight there, a lot of wisdom. I know our listeners appreciate what you're putting out there. There's a lot of goodness there. But I want to throw one more out there to the team, is that, you know what, as an individual, as a safety team leader, know yourself, know when it's time for yourself to tap out. Okay. There, you may be mismatched with this individual. You may not be able, you may be triggering this individual for whatever reason at no fault of your own, but you need to understand that it's okay to tap out in that situation. And that means another member of your team may step in and take point. They may then take that situation, engage, and try to connect with that individual. So know to tap out and let somebody who may just have another perspective or another way to engage tap in.
For sure. Did you want to add anything in closing?
No, just keep praying for our country. This culture and this current moment in time with the pending Supreme Court ruling is going to trigger. I believe, I'm concerned that it's going to trigger certain behaviors and certain activities. So again, the teams need to be aware of what's happening. It's important that the team be aware of pop culture and what's going on in the broader society. A lot of times as Christians, we may withdraw and lose awareness of what's happening in the broader society.
Absolutely.
But that's where it begins. It begins out there. And there is an educational process that needs to be ongoing about the world in which we live. As we go out and minister, as we fulfill the Great Commission, right? You need to also be, as you express the good news of Jesus Christ, you need to also try to learn what's going on in the broader society.
For sure.
Yeah.
Good. Definitely good stuff. Well, thank you again. I'll go ahead and pull you out of the broadcast, but thank you, sir. We definitely appreciate you joining us. So real quick, we'll wrap up. As always, you can visit our website at churchsafetyguys.com and get some great resources. There's some great information. You can also download our church security app, which has streaming capabilities to listen to past broadcasts. And then we also send alerts and news updates when they're serious, and we can actually broadcast that information. We usually send out alerts as to what's going on with churches, etc. And it's entirely free. You can download that free, register free, and there's a whole host of policy information and different great resource tools for you and your team. So you definitely want to check that out. As we go into season 8, we'll be bringing him back. I believe the following week we have Deepak Raju, who is a pastor out of Washington, D.C. and author of the book On Guard, which is a children's book talking about children's ministries and different things like that. And Mike has a copy of it. There you go. So just a reminder, if you are familiar with that, if you're looking for that as a resource, if you reach out to ecap.net and talk to Jeff and his team over there, they will actually send you, because you have to mention the Church Safety Guys, but they will actually send you a free copy of that book for your church. So you definitely want to reach out to him, and it's an amazing resource. But Deepak is a fantastic guy, has a great heart for ministry, and he will be joining us in a couple weeks as well. And other than that, is there anything you wanted to add, sir?
Well, I just say, you know what, it's great to get back in the saddle.
Sure.
It's been a few weeks. You know what? We had a amazing conference and had a chance to meet a ton of folks down in Orlando, Florida, and that was wonderful. As always, it's great to James, you and I to get together, but we also got to get some of our other advisors together. We have a Iron Sharpens Iron advisory. For those that are not aware, a bunch of folks that are surrounding us in prayer as well as helping drive the future of this organization. And we were able to meet with a bunch of them. So just a tremendous couple of weeks, and good to have some time to kind of recharge, refuel, and get some other things taken care of between, plus a holiday. So it's good to get back on air and get some things, topics back out there for the folks. So.
Yeah. And for those of you kind of questioning that, when we started doing this, one of the big things that we said was family first. And so when we came back from the conference, both of us, I think, were so mentally, I mean, it was amazing, but both of us were so mentally exhausted that we were like, okay, we need to take a break and spend some time with our families because we had set up the conference. And I will mention, in the middle of doing that, we actually connected and are now sponsoring a conference down in Dallas, Texas. And that information is on our website. We're one of the main sponsors of that event. So check it out. It's in August. And Lord willing, if we can pull it off, we're still trying to figure out the details. But Mike and I will actually both be down there at a table and booth, and we'll be down there in the Dallas region. If you want to swing by, you're welcome to stop by and say hi to us. We'd love to talk to you, and really looking forward to it. So as we move forward into the new season 8 of our broadcast, please keep us and your families in prayer, because we're staying busy. I was on the phone a couple of days ago with Michigan State Police because they asked us to come up and talk to them about doing conferences for the place of worship, because law enforcement is reaching out, and amazing ministry opportunity, amazing witnessing opportunity that we have to share the love of Christ. And that's our focus. That's our main focus is to keep ministry first, and to jump in there and do that. So pray for us, because, as God blesses and as we grow, oftentimes Satan doesn't really like that. So we found different things in our way that, we've just prayerfully, that's why we added the advisory committee, because we wanted folks around us praying for protection and just being able to be a sounding board for us. So,
well, interestingly enough, James, in the same week, I actually was reached out to by a Christian homeschool community. They meet in a church on a regular basis. That church does not have a safety team. And they reached out and happened to be in my backyard, essentially here.
Yep.
But we'll be meeting with them this week to discuss their concerns around. They're meeting as like a homeschool group, but they meet in a church facility. So in a way, it's kind of coming together as a community day. And there's obviously additional security and safety concerns as a result. So really just being pulled in many new directions, and praise God. I mean, a lot of people are finding us, and we're able to spend that time and reach those folks and help them out, and hopefully give them kind of some additional peace and understanding of what does it look like? What does their facility look like? So we're going to do a site walk and give them some additional insights in what they could do as part of their community day. To try to help keep that group safe.
For sure. So we are going to sign off. We'll say have a great week. God bless. And we will talk to you next week, Lord willing. Have a blessed week. Take care. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for joining the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys, sponsored by Checker. We hope that you found it informative, and we appreciate your feedback. Be sure to share our broadcast with your teams. Join the discussion online, and for other great resources, download the Church Security app or visit our website at churchsafetyguys.com. Remember, keep a servant's heart, a mindset of ministry, and semper disciplina. Always be training. Have a blessed week.